Final practice. Today is October 18th, I think, or 19th. What is it? 19th. Tomorrow, I think, is your test. So hopefully you can get all this into your body and your head and get it all straightened around in your skull so that tomorrow, when you write the test, you're ready to roll. Our first few questions are true and false, and the first one's as easy as it gets. It says negative 17 fifths is equal to negative 3.2. Any person with any common sense would do one of two things. The first common sense person would grab a calculator and do negative 17 divided by 5. But a smarter person would say, I don't need a calculator. I can change this to an improper fraction, and that's the improper fraction. And they would say, hold on, I know that that's equal to negative, right? That train of thought does not require a calculator, does it, Adriana? Not Adriana. Alexis, correct? No calculator required, correct? So therefore, you can definitively say false. They are not the same thing because this is actually equal to negative 3.4. Your second question, 0.22 is a decimal between the fractions negative a quarter and negative 1/5. First thing you should probably do is change this to a decimal, which is negative 0.25, and this, which is negative 0.20, or negative 0.2. And therefore, this one on a number line would fit between there, and therefore your answer is true. It does fit between there. Question 3 gives you two operations, addition of decimals and a division of decimals. Shouldn't require calculators. What do you have more of, positives or negatives? You have more negatives. So the difference, actually I don't need my negative symbol. The difference between your negatives that you have and your positives that you have, the difference between them, what you have more of and what you have less of, will give you the answer. I'll put a 0 here. 0 take away 6 can't do it, so I borrow. 1 take away 9 can't do it, so I borrow. What you end up is 1.20, which will be negative because that's what you have more of. So negative 1.24, and you show your work this way. Is less than, you have $7.50 divided into piles of $2.50. How many piles can you make? 3. Will they be positive or negative? They will be negative because a positive divided by a negative is a negative. So therefore, is negative 1.24 less than, because I didn't eat what I said, is negative 1.24 less than negative 3? No, it's greater. So therefore, your answer is false. Negative 1.24 is greater than negative 3 because it is closer to 0. Is there only 4 true false? Okay. So your last true false is a good estimation for this. 1.22 divided by negative 0.65 is approximately equal to, the wavy lines is the same thing as the equal sign with a dot above it, negative 2. I'm going to round this to $1.20 divided into piles of negative 60 cents. That's pretty close. Can you make 2 piles if you have $1.20? Yes. So therefore your answer is true dat. They're approximately to negative 2. Now we get into our reordering of rational numbers in ascending order from smallest to largest. Since you have both decimal form and fraction form, your options are convert them all to decimals or convert them all to fractions that have equivalent denominators. Since that is tedious and awful, I'm just going to go like this. I'm going to convert them all to decimals. This one's the only one that required maybe a calculator if you needed to, but it's actually negative 2 and 1/5, which is equal to negative 2 and 2/10, which is equal to negative 2 and 2/10. And then you put it in ascending from smallest to largest. Smallest would be the farthest from 0. This is the farthest from 0, so therefore it is your smallest. Next farthest from 0 is this one. So negative 2.51 is your next farthest. Next farthest is just negative 2.5. And your closest is negative 11/5. Notice how I didn't write this one here. I wrote it in the original form. That's what you have to do as well. So please make a note of that. If you don't do that on your test and you keep it in the converted form, you will lose a mark because it's asking you to put those rational numbers in ascending order, not the equivalent values of them. Question 6, use greater than, less than, or equals to in these blocks. Negative a quarter is not equal to negative 0.252525. Which one is closer to 0? This one is, and therefore it is greater than, because this one is, that's what this value is because of the repeating bar line above the 2.5. Negative 2.4. They are actually equal, so therefore you can put the equal sign between them. And there's the work you would have shown. If I reduce this down, I would get 4/10 instead of 8/20, and then I get negative 2.4. This is a tricky one here. It's a negative divided by a negative, and since we know that's going to become a positive, this is positive 2 6/10 versus negative 2 6/10. So therefore, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive, it has to be greater than any negative value, because anything positive will always be greater than its negative mirrored image. Question 7, what are two fractions with a 5 as a denominator? They're between negative 3 and negative 4. Here's how I would do it. I would say this first. Can anyone tell me what numerator goes there to make that equal to negative 3? Madeline. Correct. Negative 15/5 would be equal. And then I would say negative 4 is equal to how many fifths? Maddie, what would it be? Negative 20. And therefore, all of these fractions, negative 16/5, negative 17/5, negative 18/5, and negative 19/5, are all of the fractions with 5 as a denominator that fall between negative 3 and negative 4. We get into question 8. We have operations with simple rational numbers in decimal form that does not require a calculator. 5.5 plus negative 2.1, what do I have more of? I have more positives. Because I have more positives, I want to figure out what the difference is between the two. And if I subtract them, I figure out I have 3.4 more positives than negatives. And therefore, my answer is positive 3.4. So a good question was just asked while I pressed pause. And the question was, what if it was this question? So if we had this question, what do I have more of, positives or negatives? Negatives. So if I took the amount of negatives I have and subtract the positives, my answer would be negative 3.4 for this, because I know I have that many more of the negatives, right? So I'm solving an addition of two different integers that are being added by subtracting, because I'm finding the difference between them. Question 9, subtraction. I've never done it. I always keep flip change. Now that I'm adding, what do I have more of, positives or negatives? I have more positives. How many more is the difference between them? Put a 0 there because it makes more sense. Borrow. I have 3.75 more positives, and therefore that is my answer. Question 10, negative 2.8 times negative 5. 2.8 times 5. Well, 2 times 5 is 10. And 80 cents times 5 is 4. So your final answer is positive 14. Number 11, estimate. I have negative 50 cents divided into piles of negative 2 cents. How many piles of 2 cents can I make from 50 cents? The answer is 25. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. Therefore, my estimation is approximately 25. For this one, I have approximately $9 divided into piles of approximately $3. How many piles of $3 can you make from $9? 3. Positive or negative? So your estimation is approximately negative 3. If I actually grabbed a calculator to see what it was, negative 8.9 divided by 3.13 equals negative 2.84345047, whatever. Was my estimation good? Yeah. Question 13 is the subtraction of fractions, requires a common denominator. Thank you. Requires equivalent fractions. First step. Second step, subtract your numerators, keep your denominator. Final step, examine your answer to see if it's in lowest terms. If it is, that is your answer. Don't forget on your test, show this step. You have to show that step. Hopefully it doesn't. It'd be the terrible way to die. Question 14, the addition. The only difference is this time we have a mixed fraction, which we don't like, so we're going to change it to improper. 8 times 1 is 8 plus 7 is 15. So it's negative 15/8. Keep your negative sign in your numerator. Makes life great. What's the first multiple 6 and 8 share? 24 will be my first common denominator, my lowest common denominator. If you use 48, no big deal. Times it by 4, times it by 4, 20. Times it by 3, times it by 3, negative 45. Add your numerators. Keep your denominator. Negative 25/24, which is negative 1 and 1/24. Again, don't forget this step. That's a piece of cake, sir. And our final few questions. 20 is a addition string here. When you have just addition and addition, what I recommend you do is just make them all into improper fractions to start. Find your common denominator that all three of them share, in this case 15. Equivalent fractions for all of them. And since it's just the addition of three fractions that all have the same denominator, just add your numerators and keep your denominator. So here I'm going to have 49/29 over 15, which is equal to 1 and 14/15. Question 16, 14/15. When I have this question, I've been trying to convince people that if you have the multiplication of fractions, Bronson, 16 is the multiplication of two fractions. Remember that at this stage here, when I multiply my numerators, I'm always going to get negative 10. And it won't matter if I swap those numerators. It would not have mattered. I'd still get negative 10 as a numerator. So because this is true, we can do what's called cross reduction. I can pretend this was over here, give me actually 1 over 4 instead of 2 over 8. And over here, I get negative 1 over 3 instead of negative 5 over 15. When I do that, I will get my final answer negative 1/12 without having to reduce. If I didn't, I get negative 10 over 120, which will be both divisible by 10, which would still give me that when I reduced it by dividing both numerator and denominator by 10. Question 17, treat all whole numbers as fractions over 1. Keep your first fraction, change the multiplication by the reciprocal. Keep your negative symbol, no matter where it was to begin with, in your numerator. When you multiply your numerators, oops, daisy, Negative 5 times 8, negative 8, excuse me, over 1 times 9 will equal 40 over 9, which will equal negative 4 and 4 ninths. Oh, sorry, positive 4 and 4 ninths, not negative. Positive 4 and 4 ninths. Story problems will be a second video.